Hey, Yinz guys and gals, gather round for a journey like no other. It's time to hop on board the Where Yinz Goin podcast. From the rivers that meet at the point to form downtown Pittsburgh, to the Great Salt Lake, to the furthest corners of the globe, Matt and Katie will be your compass, your confidants, your companions of that, as we explore the wonders of travel. So kick back, relax on your couch, and let the wanderlust wash over Yinz as we discover new horizons and reminisce about old favorites. With Matt and Katie by our side, the sky's the limit. Join Matt and Katie on the Where Yinz Goin podcast, because when it comes to travel, the journey's just getting started. And now, without further ado, let's give a shout for your guides through the highways and byways of travel, the planning partners, the travel tandem, Matt and Katie.
Hi, Yinz doing? Welcome to the Where Yinz Goin podcast. I'm Matt. I'm one of your hosts. Joining me again today is my co-host Katie. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Matt.
So today we're going to park our car at Harvard Yard. So we're going to make a trip to Boston. Maybe we should start with shipping up to Boston. Over the Dropkick Murphys.
I love Boston. Boston's one of my favorite cities.
So growing up in the 80s with a basketball obsessed family, Larry Bird was very, very big in our household. So Boston became a beloved location. And it was a very big deal when we were younger and we had to take a trip to Boston. And so, yeah, you'll hear about more of that later. Although now the song Shipping Up to Boston from the movie The Departed, my little girl hasn't seen that, all right? But we've listened to the song and she likes that one.
It's
But
such a cool city. Lots and lots of I mean, it's a it's a given that there's lots of history there, but it's vibrant. It has a lot to do, a lot to see. You could make a whole big trip out of it or use it as like a starting point to explore other parts of the New England area.
absolutely. And being a cool city, let's make the point now. I've been to Boston several times, and one of them was a conference in February.
Oh, so it's cold.
It was, so we did one of these walking tours that we're going to talk about, and we lasted maybe halfway, and then my wife was like, "All right, I'm cold. We got a plane to catch. Let's just go." So I've done uh, conferences in Boston in February, and both in Austin in late July, and Phoenix in August. We need to work on that.
Yeah, seems like conferences are never scheduled during the time that you actually want to go visit these places.
So, but we're going to start by taking one of the most famous things you can do in Boston, the Freedom Trail. And just by going through the different locations that you're going to stop along the Freedom Trail whenever you do the walking tour, we're going to hit some of the big sites of Boston. So you don't have to do the whole Freedom Trail, but these are going to be some of the bigger things that you want to go see.
I think
So,
this is like really something if you don't have like any like knowledge of what the Freedom Trail is, or if you have like certain ideas of what the word trail says, like it's not a hiking trail. It's not like you're not out in the great outdoors hanging out with your favorite wildlife. This is an actual like walk of like in the city. But it's so well thought out, and it's so well marked, and you can kind of hop in and hop out of it, and there's always something. It to me when we went, it seemed like there was always something like even cooler at the next stop or something else that was just really thought-provoking, or it's just a really neat way to show if you have somebody that's into history, if your kids are studying American history and they're trying to get a kind of a view of what was going on, because we can tell stories about history in textbooks and everything else, but walking the actual steps and seeing these places where where America kind of got its start at, where a lot of like the early colonial history started, you really get a really good idea of what it's all about.
That's a very good point about learning history in general. And we've talked on this podcast about the Battle of Gettysburg, and we're talking about that again coming up in July. So look for the anniversary of Gettysburg special edition. But actually being in a place is such a better way to learn history than just from reading about it in the book, in a book. And Katie's her history major anyway, so this is right up her alley.
Yeah, these places like they stick with you. I mean, of course, the city looks different. There's different things that have popped up and everything like that, but you actually get to walk in the spots where some of the people that you just read about and the big names in history are there. It's kind of just a cool like so I love the Freedom Trail. We did the Freedom Trail. So my experience with Boston, having being kind of a Western state gal, is we flew into Boston and we used Boston as our starting point, and we actually drove up and drove to Maine and did Bar Harbor and Acadia, and then we came back and spent a day in Boston. So our day back in Boston, we did the Freedom Trail, and we did it in June. I think we were in there in June. And I just remember it was hot. We got right on the plane and we were like sweaty, but it was worth it. Like it's such a cool place. I love it.
Now, the Freedom Trail is free to walk. Now, some of the places along it have admission fees, but just to walk it, it's free and it's easy to find. Just look on the ground and find the brick line that goes along the sidewalk. Now, bring your walking shoes because this is 2.5 miles long, and there are 16 sites that are related to the American Revolution and early U.S. history. And there are guided tours available. Whenever we did it one time, whenever we were younger, we did the free version. More recently, whenever my wife and went, we did have a guide. Um, and so both are fine. They have different things to read there. It just depends
So if we're
on.
booking like a trip for you and you want to do this, we can go ahead and make recommendations about some really good tour companies that can take you through and do the Freedom Trail, and you can have somebody with you the whole time. Or if you're really just into just like kind of going at your own pace, doing your own thing, it's completely like Matt said, it's completely doable with anybody guiding you. It kind of is self-explanatory. And along the way, if you have any questions, there's tons of people that are totally willing to answer your questions and help you get to the next place you're going.
Yeah, and it's different locations. There, people are there to talk to you. The It also depends on how much you know about history to begin with and how into it you are. It's like, oh, I've read about this whole thing, and it's like the old commercial for milk that the Aaron Burr guy, he had like the bullet and the pistols of everything of the whole Alexander Hamilton Aaron Burr duel, and so he knew everything. He didn't need a guide. That did not happen in Boston. Okay, that was more New York, but just still making an analogy. All right, so first stop though is going to be the Boston Common. And don't worry, we won't bring the accent in here, although it's more of a Southie thing, not an overall Boston. So you have to, you only hear that in certain locations. But the Boston Common was established in 1634. It's the oldest public park in the United States. So, I was in grade school when that first got established.
It's a really cool, like, just a neat little public park with lots of things that you can see and do. And it's a good little start to where you're going to, like, kind of make your first. And it's also that, so parking around the Freedom Trail, there's tons of different options. There's a lot of, like, hotels that you can pay to park your car for a couple of hours. There's different options. So it's accessible. I mean, this is a big city, so and there's no denying that, but it is accessible and the I don't know. I love that it starts kind of in a public place, the public park, kind of like a good little starting place where you can kind of get your directions and kind of get the lay of the land.
And this is where a lot of the tours will start too, the guided tours.
Yeah, they have a
And so
really
you're
nice
right there.
visitor center there too.
Yeah, real good information. That's where you're going to go to start your tour. The if it's guided tour. Another nice thing is if we can find a nice hotel for you that's in within walking distance, and there are
Yeah.
several that are fairly near there. That makes it very, very convenient, so you don't even have to drive. Now, very close to there is the Massachusetts State House. It's the seat of Massachusetts government since 1798. It's in what's called the Beacon Hill area, and the dome is plated in 23 karat gold leaf. It was originally a wood dome, but it leaked. So Paul Revere and Sons plated it with copper in 1802. Familiar names there. And then it was gilded with gold in 1874, then again in 1969, 1997, and just recently last year in 2024. And whenever you do the guided tour, I forget exactly how much the gold is worth, but based on what your punishment would be if you are caught and how long you'd have to serve in jail, it's not worth the risk of stealing. It's only actually a couple of $1,000s. It's really not that much gold up there, which is kind of surprising.
Kind of just a thin little layer.
Hmm. Next up is the Park Street Church, founded in 1809, which is the year that Abraham Lincoln was born, and Charles Darwin. So the reason I know that is because they all share a birthday, and they were born exactly 200 years before my nephew. So I think that's
We
pretty
like
neat.
throw out these dates, right? And it's kind of unfathomable that these buildings are still standing. That we've taken really good care of them. The people of Boston have taken really good care of the history. It that's one of the things I really love about Boston is you've got these modern skyscrapers and modern buildings and little delis and everything else. And then something that'll pop up from the early 1800s or the late 1700s is right there in all of its glory. They've mixed the old with the new very well.
Yeah, definitely. It's it feels kind of European actually. That if you go to Europe, you have some of like the very modern buildings, but then there's also these other places that have been around for hundreds of years, and then you get the old architecture with the new, and it's a nice mix. Now the Park Street Park Street Church, making sure I enunciate there, it's on top of Boston's grain storage building, so also called the granary that you'll hear it. It has a 217-foot steeple that was once the first landmark that travelers would see whenever they're approaching Boston. So if you're sailing for months at a time, across the ocean, and then you finally see something poking up over the horizon, and it's going to be this steeple that you know that you're getting close to land. So you can just picture back hundreds of years ago, what that would be like. Now, right near there is the Granary Burial Ground, which was established in 1660. It's well known, some well known people who are buried there are Ben Franklin's parents, John Hancock, Paul Revere, Sam Adams, and the victims of the Boston Massacre.
It's really a cool, like, I know that so these old-fashioned, very like old cemeteries, they're really neat to go in and kind of look around and see the headstones and kind of get a like feel of people's history just with a small little like tribute to them on their gravesite. There's a lot of really like interesting stories. They do a really good job of they have some plaques and things like that where you can read about. So if there's something that is kind of not everybody that is buried in these cemeteries are well known, but all of their stories should be discovered and told because these are the people that I mean, so in history we talk a lot about the John Hancocks, Paul Revere, George Washington, but there were lots of just regular old people that were doing their part. They were doing their part to help support this new fledgling country. They were doing their part in circumstances that probably weren't the easiest. And their stories, they do a pretty good job of like giving you kind of an idea of like kind of some of the common stories too. So yes, for sure, check out John Hancock and Paul Revere and stuff. But there's other people there that are just kind of like you and I that are just going out doing their daily jobs and they have stories about how they were around when America started, which is really cool to think about.
I've heard it said that some of the most interesting reading in the newspaper, if you remember what newspapers were, are the obituaries. That you get to read about these people's lives and what people did. And they weren't famous necessarily or well known, but you get a story of a person. And that's kind of leading up with what Katie was saying, that you're not going to get the full obituaries with these people, but still, it's interesting to imagine the life this person led and what it was like to be in their shoes and to see the founding of a nation.
Well, and I always think about the fact that that some people that these people might not be famous, their names might not be something written in the history books, but to somebody else, they were their everything, right?
That's very true. Now, moving on with our next one, and along these same lines, is the King's Chapel and King's Chapel Burial Ground, founded in 1686. So only 1686. I mean, come on. It was the Boston's first Anglican church, and the granite building that is there dates to 1754. So this is the beginning of the French and Indian War era. Now, the next one is actually pretty neat. That is the Boston Latin School and Ben Franklin statue. That this was founded on April 23rd, 1635. It's the oldest public school in the U.S. It offered free education to boys, and girls had to attend private schools back then at home. So it was basically like in-home tutors. The schoolhouse was finished in 1645, and classes were held at the home of the first headmaster, Philemon Pourmont, before that. And Ben Franklin, the reason the statue's there of him is that that's where he went to school as a kid. So, I don't know, the injustice for girls that they have to stay at home. Although, I guess some of them wouldn't mind because they didn't have to go to school with boys, which, you know.
So the schoolhouse was really cool. It's not like it's not fancy, but it's amazing. Like again, like I guess that like to repeat myself again, humble beginnings still create great people too, right?
Yeah, you get to see what Ben Franklin became with being an inventor and a diplomat and a statesman and one of the founding fathers. And it's like little, 6, 7 year old Benny was there.
Right. And so like and then the other thing that comes into it is you never know what somebody's potential is. Like I'm sure that Mr. Philemont never really thought about how he was going to shape, kind of have some kind of play in what the whole history of the US was, right? I mean, he had a student in his class. It was probably a pesky little 7-year-old boy, but he got to he through all of his story, Franklin was able to become the great man that he was.
And talking to different teachers and being a teacher, just that idea of you never know the potential that some of these kids are going to have. And now I see it in some of my students who are very bright and, you know, that I know that they're going to go on to some great things. And I've, followed them along or kept in touch down the line. And I've seen, where they gone to grad school or done this or done that. But yeah, it's an amazing thing to think about, these kids in your class who are just young kids, even though some of them, college age, they're adults legally, they're still kids. That what are they going to? How is their life going to progress?
Right. And what contribution are they going to make?
And like I say with my little girl, hopefully she'll use her powers for good someday.
She will.
Next up is the Old Corner Bookstore, which was built in 1718. It's the oldest commercial building in Boston, and it's home to Ticknor and Fields, who are well was home to them. They were publishers from the 1800s, and just some of the works that were published there: Walden by Henry David Thoreau, The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and Atlantic Monthly was printed there, including the the I don't want to say episode. It's not episode. Um, what's the correct thing for a magazine? The issue. There we go. The issue that had the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which was penned by Ward Howe. So right there, you're seeing like greatness in American literature.
I know it sounds stupid, but you go in there and you can smell the ink, like because it wasn't like a like the way we think of publishing books now and things like that. It was a whole production with typesets and machines and tons of reels and reels of paper and stuff. You can just kind of you can feel it. You can feel and smell like like the the tools that made the written word accessible to people.
And I think is it the movie The Post, which was about the Washington Post, back like in the 70s. I think Tom Hanks is in it. But the beginning part of that is they show how they did some of the printing of it, and they would type things in, and then the different letters would come together and to form, the stamper to make the different pages, print out the different pages. And just imagine that that's like 200 years after all this was done, and like the painstaking, how meticulous it was to put each letter in there to then have it be printed.
Right, and that your hands would never come clean. They were always stained with the ink of like some of the greatest like words that we still think of and talk about today. Lots of history.
There was some pride in that. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I got the ink from that book on my hands.
Yep.
Next up on our stop is the Old South Meeting House, which is where the Boston Tea Party started. And so that's where they met and they got all dressed up and then they, in their Indian garb, to head to the harbor to dump a bunch of tea in Boston Harbor. And then not too far on is the Old State House, which is the oldest surviving public building in Boston that was built in 1713. Now back at one of the graveyards from before, we talked about the victims of the Boston Massacre. You actually get to stop at the Boston Massacre site, which happened on March 5th, 1770. The clash between Bostonians and the Redcoats, where Crispus Attucks, Samuel Gray, James Caldwell, Samuel Maverick, and Patrick Carr were all killed by Redcoats. And then Redcoats eventually evacuated um, until 1774 before they came back after that. So everyone who knows their American history, that was a big
Catalyst.
moment. Yes.
Yeah.
Catalyst leading to the American Revolution.
And here's the thing, this is why this is kind of like a cool place to go visit if you are into early American history. The there's not like you can kind of picture it, right? Tensions are high. You've got these new kind of cocky kids that are trying to make history, and you've got these soldiers that are there from Britain that their job is to just keep the not necessarily keep the peace, but they're there to kind of keep order and on behalf of the king. And the areas, the some of the roads are narrow, and you can see how like they they would how tensions would be high, how like walking down the street and bumping shoulders just to kind of like jockey for like who is superior and stuff. You can see why some of these like feelings and some of the like just the like almost felt like a kettle just about ready to pop, right? It it makes more sense when you see it.
And that goes back to what you said before, Katie, about whenever you actually get to visit one of these places, that the history comes alive when you're here, when you actually get to see it, when you get to feel it. There, since we're in Boston, let's mention the great movie Good Will Hunting, that the Robin Williams character, he's talking to the Matt Damon character of Will, and he's saying, okay, you can read about all this stuff in books, You can tell me exactly what's all on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel and the color paint they use and how big it is and all the dimensions. But can you tell me what it smells like?
Right. And that's the thing, like history, in my opinion, history needs to be felt, not just learned. Because once you feel a place, once you become more in tune with what you're seeing, what you're seeing is what you've read about, it becomes more real and you become more empathetic towards situations and you kind of have a better idea um, of even your current life, right? History helps to make things more clear of what's going on in the present too.
That's another good thing. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. That whenever you learn
Yes.
about history, it makes current things make sense and you can see correlations. And, it's the whole thing of trying to attack Russia in the winter. Napoleon did it. It happened in World War II. It doesn't work, so don't try it.
Right.
Next up is Faneuil Hall, which if you look at the spelling of it, does not look like it should be. You kind of see Faneuil, but it's a whole lot more going on with it. Faneuil. So this is the home of free speech or the cradle of liberty. It hosted America's first town meetings and it played a very key role in the revolutionary politics.
It was a place for them to kind of get their grievances out and talk and start.
It was the safe space where you just come and say what you wanted and
Right.
without fear of the redcoats looking over your shoulder and, you know, King George showing how much he loves you by, giving more taxes and things like that. Next up on our list is the Paul Revere House. It was built around 1680, and Paul Revere owned it from 1770 to about 1800. Well, that just says something that when Paul Revere bought it, it was almost 100 years old.
Yep.
That this is the oldest structure in downtown Boston, and it's the only Freedom Trail historic site that is a home. So it's still a home. It's still owned and lived in by somebody. I'd like to have that as your house.
Mhm.
Now you probably get kind of annoying though with people knocking on the door. So yeah, please don't do that. Respect the owners. Now this used to be near the water, and this is pretty interesting. That if you see some of the historical maps of historical Boston, colonial Boston, that it looked vastly different in its footprint. That the downtown area and all the large buildings are built on the actual land that is actual land, but a lot of the outer stuff is landfill that was created to make much of what Boston is, but they can't. The landfill's not quite strong enough to support the weight of all those larger buildings, so they have to go on the actual, you know, real land. But other stuff you can walk on was landfill, which I thought was just really amazing about how the landscape of Boston changed over the years because of that. And yeah, don't eat anything off the ground, please, whether here or anywhere else. Then, of course, if we're going to talk about Paul Revere, the next one's going to be the Old North Church. So one if by land, two if by sea. Put in the lanterns in the window. This was built in 1723. It's Boston's oldest church. By the way, it was two because they came by sea. And if you go, you can go into this, and it's interesting that they have what are called box pews, not the normal row pews. So it's basically like these little booths, and on the doors are these little plaques, very small thing, like a nameplate type thing of who the original owners were of these boxes. And so going
You
through
know,
this,
they had to put those plaques on there because somebody was taking up one of the other like old timers boxes and they started an argument.
it's yeah, you can't sit there. That's my box.
That's my spot.
I
That's
was
where
there
we
last
sit
week.
every Sunday. We've sat every Sunday for umpteenth years in this little box. You're not allowed to be in my box.
People get territorial over their seats.
Yep.
I remember back when I was in college, there was one guy who he had a heck of a personality. And every once in a while, at the middle of the semester, he would just sit in a different seat in class than he normally sat in. And he said, like, yeah, have you ever, people just, you don't have assigned seats, but people claim seats. So if you
Right.
sit in someone's seat, you see they come and sit down and they look at you like, wait, that's my seat. Shouldn't I be there? And he's like, just the confusion on their face, and you got a kick out of it.
And I'm sure like you probably experienced this, but when I was in college, we would have different classes in the same lecture hall. And no matter what, like you try hard, but it would be this totally different class on a totally different day, and you'd end up sitting in the exact same spot that you sit in the first day. Kind of a funny thing, people.
Well, it made life easier because sometimes whenever you couldn't get that same seat and then you got confused, wait, which seat do I sit in on this day? Wait, is this
Right?
the
Yep.
front row or the back row? Wait, I usually tried to sit in the back row just because, not because I was bad. I paid attention in college. I did good. I was just tall and didn't want to block anyone's view. At least that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Next up is Cops Hill Burying Ground. And like some of the names of this, it's not a cemetery, it's the burying ground. You know, it gets the point across, right? Don't mince words on this. That this was established in 1659. It's the resting place of merchants, artisans, and craftspeople who lived in the north end of Boston, including Cotton Mather and Increase Mather, who were very famous in the Salem witch trials. Uh, Prince Hall, who was the founder of the Black Masonry. Robert Newman, who hung the lanterns in the Old North Church for Paul Revere, and who was the other guy? Because it was not just Paul Revere who made the ride. There were several of them, and a few of them got captured along the way. Robert Newman, sorry, just said Robert Newman. Edmund Hart, who was the builder of the USS Constitution, which we'll get to in a minute. And there are also many free African Americans who were buried there. And also on the spot was where the British placed cannon there to fire on Charlestown in the Battle of Bunker Hill in 1775, which we'll address in a little bit. So, speaking of the USS Constitution, nicknamed Old Ironsides, it is the world's oldest commissioned naval warship still afloat. It was launched in 1797. So, naval personnel still serve on this ship. So, if you're in the Navy, you could be assigned to be on the Constitution. How about that? So, it got its name of Old Ironsides whenever there were cannonballs that were bouncing off of it during the War of 1812. And it got the nickname when it was capturing the HMS. How do you pronounce that? The Guerrier,
Yeah,
Guerriere,
it's Courier.
Guerrier. It was retired in 1881. The Constitution was. It was designated a museum in 1907, and it took a 3-year 90 port tour in 1934, and is also sailed in 1997 and then again in 2012. So it sailed on its 200th birthday. So, important thing to note here is that if you are going to visit it and you want to drive there, there is no physical address. So, it's recommended that you use the address for the Nautica parking garage, which is nearby. And if you look on the USS Constitution Museum's website, that's what they recommend. Although a travel advisor can also help you with that.
Yep.
Museum is open daily from 10 to 5, although closed on holidays. There is no admission fee, but they ask for donations. They suggest $10, and then a $5 is the reduced donation, but you can pay more. It's up to you. Especially if you go on and you really enjoy yourself, you can always give them a little bit extra. There's a lot of hands-on learning activities where you get to learn what it was like to sail in 1812. There's a lot of good digital displays. There's artifacts. There's also a Lego brickyard that's open after 1 o'clock on weekdays and all day on weekends. So if you're taking the young kids and they get a little antsy about reading plaques and whatever else, and they just need to be a kid, they get to go and play with Legos. Or excuse me, play with Lego because that is the plural official thing. And now the ship itself is only open on certain days of the week. It's open on Wednesdays through Sundays, 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. It is free, but you do have to go through security and show a government issued ID to get on. So
Right.
please be aware of that. And we got to do that, and it's it's really amazing to go on that ship and to go down below decks and to see where the sailors would have slept and just to see what life is like, 200 years ago.
Yeah. Amazing, like how they created these ships, right? And put them together. And like you think about history as being like here's the start, and then like you hear the start and then you hear the conclusion, but you kind of forget the messy middle and things like putting together these ships and things like that are like the messy middle, right? That they didn't just pop out of nowhere. People made sacrifices to get things like these ships in the ocean and ready to protect the land that they loved.
And these are built before the Industrial Revolution. So a lot of this is done
Right,
with
hand by
painstaking
hand.
hand stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like by hand.
It's well before the Industrial Revolution, 100 years before that. So it's just amazing. The last stop on the Freedom Trail is the Bunker Hill Monument, which commemorates the Battle of Bunker Hill on June 17th, 1775, the first major battle of the Revolutionary War. Now, the battle was actually fought on Breed's Hill, and the British were supposed to fortify Bunker Hill, but they mixed up their locations. And so this monument was built from 1824 to 1843. The cornerstone was laid by the Marquis de Lafayette on the 50th anniversary of the battle. So, I mean, talk about big names in history and just giants of history who are playing a part in this. It is 221 feet tall. There are 294 steps that go up in a spiral around it. So it's like a circular monument, and you walk up. And going up that, it's really interesting that, looking out the little windows on the side, but the view like doesn't change as you're going up. That it's like always the same thing you see in front of you because you're just like in this like tube going up this staircase. And then
So
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, with all these things in mind, like we've talked about all of these stops and everything like that, and we've kind of just like hit on them really, really quick. Really and truly, you could make a whole weekend out of the Freedom Trail. I mean, you could go to Boston and do nothing but just the Freedom Trail, because even though we've kind of just like given little like snippets of the things that you can see and stuff like that, there you're gonna want to stop and really like you could really do a deep dive into a lot of these different historical sites and really depending on who you're traveling with, depending on how history geeky you are, depending on if you have little ones and stuff like that, you can do all of them. You can do it quick, or you can really just expand it out and do a few or half one day and a half the other day and really dive deep into what you're seeing and hearing about.
And if you take one of the guided tours, the tour guides, oh, they are fabulous. The
Yeah,
stories and the history they know, and they're telling stories that make it come to life. It's not just, oh, and in 1832 this happened here, and in 1763 this happened here. They're telling the story that the way they do their storytelling, it's like it's coming alive in front of you. And to
right.
be
Because
in that place and to see the landscape, you can picture it a lot better in your mind.
Right, because throwing out dates and like just talking about just like short little snippets of things, you don't really get the history of the feelings, the stuff, the stories. I mean, that's the thing. Like a good like historical site should make you more passionate, should help you to become more informed about it. And it also should help you develop an opinion and about what happened there. And it's okay to have an opinion that might be different or the same, but it should give you the information so you become more informed about what made this spot important enough to save, important enough to still talk about now, right? Because there's hundreds and hundreds of spots that things have happened on that we don't talk about. So why this one?
That's a great point you just made right there, Katie. And we kind of hit on this with the both the Gettysburg episodes that we did earlier and the ones that are going to be coming up in July. about your perspective of things and understanding what happened and why things happened, and then forming your opinion on it. And it's kind of funny that in Pittsburgh, in the one area, there's a plaque on the one building that I forget the exact date, but it says like on this date on October 5th, 1922, nothing happened. It's just
Yes, but something did. That's the thing is that that's like such a lie. Something did for somebody, but it just isn't something that's important enough to like talk about, right? And that's the thing. Like history is based in facts, but it's also very much so. And we've talked about this already earlier in the podcast, but history is also based in feelings. And the ones that write history, they might have had a different feeling than maybe the one that's down the street that experienced it a different way. I mean, there's so many things with history that go into like human behavior and how you perceive things and where your stories started and where you've been to help you to understand why you view this way. And that's what history is. History is facts, but it's also very much skewed towards who writes history.
the victors. History is written by
Yeah,
the
it
victors.
is.
So good historical perspective. I like that. And now, other historical perspective of the battle, the Bunker Hill Monument, is that there's a picture from, oh, I was a teenager. I was like 14 years old the one time we went, that we climbed it. And at the end, when we got back to the bottom, there's the sign that says that, it's 221 feet tall. There's 294 steps. And my dad's pointing to the picture, and I'm standing just looking up at the top, like looking completely exhausted. So,
You guys should redo that.
yeah, we have to get my dad to come back up with us
Yeah.
sometime. Now, if you don't want to have to, either after you've done your 2.5 mile walk, and if your feet need a little bit of break, especially after you're climbing your 294 steps, although it's actually um 588 because you got to go up and then back down them too.
Right. We never remember that where you start is where you end too. So
You can sit down and relax and get a nice tour of Boston on the Duck Tours. These were started on October 5th, 1994. They originally used World War II DUKW vehicles. So great, military abbreviations. That the D meant that it was a 1942 production series. U meant a utility vehicle. K was all-wheel drive, and W was tandem rear axles, so driven by both. So, the, why the DUK? Why they're duck boats? So this year the season began on March 28th. So it's only been going for a couple weeks now. These tours are 80 minutes long. You spend about 60 minutes on land and 20 minutes in the Charles River, or excuse me, on the Charles River, hopefully not in it. They have a conductor spelled Conductor, who gives the narration. It costs about $55 a person. Now, the one time that we went as kids, that it was in July of 1994. So the first time we were up there, it was right before the tugboat tours opened. But I remember being up there. It was for the World Cup whenever it was in the United States, and we got up there a few days after the one of the soccer matches, and I remember buying a soccer ball that had like all the flags of the different countries who were in the World Cup. It eventually got used by my nieces and nephews outside and got destroyed, but I had it. It was in mint condition for years. But that was also the time that the All Star game was in Pittsburgh at Three River Stadium. Because I remember being from Pittsburgh, but being in Boston watching the All Star game happen in Pittsburgh, which is kind of a surreal, weird thing. This other place is not on the Freedom Trail, but it's referenced in the Freedom Trail in several locations. The Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum. That these are right by Boston Harbor. The Boston Tea Party happened on December 16th, 1773. The Sons of Liberty dressed up as Mohawk Indians and dumped 342 chests of East India Company tea into Boston Harbor.
this
This
is
was
a big deal.
big deal, yeah. It was
Yeah.
made to protest the Tea Act of 1773. It was the results after this were the intolerable acts. Although, if you're in Britain, they're called the coercive acts.
Yep.
And the really neat thing on this, and I remember doing this, especially as a kid, of reenacting on these ships the Boston Tea Party. So you get to, they have these like bales of, I don't even know what's in them. It floats and there's a rope attached to it. But you get to pick up these things and just toss them into the water, which was so much fun. Just throwing things in. It's like, normally you can't do that. And then you reel them back in with the rope and someone else can throw them in. But I remember me and my sisters doing this for a while. But we mentioned before that after the Boston Massacre, that the Redcoats left Boston in 1770, came back in 1774. Well, the Boston Tea Party happened the end of 1773. So you see a correlation between right there.
Yep.
Whenever you pay attention to these dates, you can see how, oh, this caused that, which caused this other thing. And you can see how they're all related to one another.
Yep.
The other big thing, besides duck boats in Boston, are the swan boats. So these are in the public garden. They've been in operation since 1877, and they'll start the second week of April until Labor Day. So they're just starting right now. There are six boats. They were built between 1910 and 1992, and each holds about 18 to 24 adults. And don't worry, they're pedaled by the driver, not by you.
That's right, because the ones that are at the Swan and Dolphin at Walt Disney World, they're pedaled by you. And they don't hold 18 to 24. They only hold two. Maybe they hold more. Maybe they hold three. I don't know. But yeah, yep.
Depends
I'm
on the
all
size of
for
the people
pedal.
who are on them.
Yep, I'm all for pedaling and by the driver. So
Especially because whenever you're supposed to pedal with the other person next to you, and it feels like you're doing all the work, yeah, kind of like just the Surrey bikes. Whenever you're going up, pedal harder. I am pedaling harder. You pedal harder. And now, probably one of the most famous places to go in Boston to eat is Cheers, which I'm sorry, but it's not going to look anything like the bar that was in the TV show. Only now the outside part with the sign and the little hand like pointing down, that's the same. But inside, the actual bar area is a lot smaller. It's just like the little front end of a bar. It's not the whole thing going around where the bartender's in the middle. It's just the bartender behind a bar with the back wall there. But you can go. That's in the basement. You can go upstairs to eat, and there's all kinds of different rooms. And I think we were in like in a library room whenever we ate there. Just at least from the looks of it, it had bookshelves and stuff like that. But it's going to eat. It's a different experience, but it's a rite of passage to say that you ate at Cheers. Now, as we were on one of the tours, the driver pointed out that there's also another place, another restaurant that's called Three Cheers, and he said that the three on the sign keeps getting smaller and smaller every year. So
I
don't
was just
fall for that.
thinking, I wonder how many of your students and stuff even know what Cheers is now. Like that's like, yeah, that was like a show that I remember sitting down and watching every time it came on with my mom and dad, and my dad loved it. It was just, but I don't know if it's like, does it have the staying power? I don't know. You don't hear
I don't
about
know if
shows
it's on
like that.
reruns anywhere, but
Yeah, I don't know. It's not, I don't know if, I'm sure it's on in syndication somewhere, but I don't know where.
I have to either, showing how old I am, I'm going to get the box set of DVDs. Or I got to find where it's streaming because
Yeah.
whenever this was on, I was, just growing up in the 80s. And so we watched it and we saw, some of the stuff, but I never really understood all the jokes.
Yeah.
And then when I was older, I saw a couple episodes like, oh my God, this is hilarious. I mean, Woody Harrelson getting his start.
Yeah.
Um, who was
That's
Sam the
it.
bartender?
I
Um,
tend to,
Ted Danson.
I remember
But
like thinking, how cool would it be to walk into a place and always be greeted by your first name? Like people were excited to see you, right?
well, just the theme song. I mean, I have that on my playlist. So it's so classic. And I mean, whenever this was years ago, that my dad had season tickets to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we had a kicker named Norm Johnson.
Yep.
And so whenever he would kick a field goal or an extra point or whatever, they would show a little clip on the Jumbotron of Norm from Cheers walking into the bar, and everyone would yell, Norm. Although I think some kids nowadays do know, or at least should know a little bit about this if they've ever seen Toy Story,
Yeah.
because they got some of the actors from the who was the mailman. He was it did the pig.
Ratzenberg, right? Is it
Yes.
Ratzenberg? Yeah.
I knew it started with an A. I couldn't didn't want to mess up pronouncing it.
Yep, he's part of it.
So other places you can get other food you're gonna get there. New England clam chowder. Oh, I had some really good clam chowder there. The lobster. Now this is different from, growing up in Pittsburgh, going to Red Lobster and getting this little rock lobster tail. That we got to have an actual full lobster. I was like, wait, lobsters come with the claws too? You can do that? It's not just the tail. It was a whole new experience for me. Especially because the one that my sister got was a female lobster that must have been pregnant at the time that we found. That- so
Yay.
there's your anatomy lesson for the day, kids. Getting this on your plate at dinner. She's like, "What's this?" And my dad was like, "Oh." Also
Yeah,
the
there's some of the
clams.
best
Oh,
seafood. Like Boston has some really good seafood and really good like little like hole in the wall places to go and eat and stuff like that.
it's
And
like Lou. Go ahead, Katie.
well, I was just gonna say we found like just like the guys on the street and stuff like that. If you asked, they would tell you, and not only would they tell you, but they would give you their honest opinion about where you should go and where you should not go, and the reasons why. I mean, they were pretty persuasive about the ideas of, like, they seemed pretty trustworthy about where you should go eat.
They also tell you what to order at the place too. Of yeah,
Yeah,
this is a great
yeah,
place for this, but not that. And
yeah, yeah,
yeah, like they're just clams, crab, other fish. They also I found this is I think where I learned there's a difference between ordering clams and fried clam strips.
yep.
And I was not a big fan of the clams. The clam strips I liked a lot better. So yeah, my dad was like, "Are you sure you want that?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I have them all the time." And it came with like, "Oh, why didn't you tell me before this, Dad? Come on." Oh, I
You
think he did that on purpose because then he ate like whatever I didn't. So he had an angle on that. Now, something that's gonna be coming up this Monday is Patriots Day. So it started in 1894 that Lexington petitioned the Massachusetts General Court to make April 19th Lexington Day. Concord then countered with Concord Day. And actually, the largest battle that day was um, Menotomy, which is now Arlington on the Concord Road between Lexington and Boston. And then the governor compromised by just calling it, okay, let's call it Patriots Day. So this is what led up to the whole, um, Paul Revere's ride in the Old North Church, one if by land, two if by sea. That this happened on the 18th of April, and then he made the ride, pronouncing the Redcoats are coming. All it wasn't the British were coming because they were all British then. So, but then April 19th, which also happens to be my sister's birthday. So happy
Yeah.
birthday. And also my little girl's friend's birthday too. So in 1969, it was changed to the third Monday in April. Also celebrated. This is also celebrated in Maine, which was part of Massachusetts until the Missouri Compromise of 1820. And so this can be April 21st this year, so Monday. And it's also the day that the Boston Marathon is traditionally run. And then on Patriots Day, it's been on Patriots Day since the marathon started in 1897. The Red Sox have played a home game on Patriots Day since 1959. In between 1968 and 2006, the game started at 11 o'clock in the morning, but the game usually ended when the runners were going through the area, so it was kind of a mass chaos. So starting in 2007, the game now starts between 9:30 and 10 o'clock in the morning. So if you want some morning baseball, there you go. Although I'm not sure if I'd want to be one of the players getting up, especially hopefully don't play a night game right before that.
It's a beautiful place to watch a baseball game. Really pretty
Uh,
place, Fenway.
Fenway, yeah, and actually it's on a Monday, so the Sunday game is usually going to be an afternoon game unless they get Sunday night baseball. So yeah, they usually
It's a
get the
beautiful
chance to get
spot to go see a game at.
this is one that's on my bucket list. Though I have to get into there to one take a tour of the stadium and two to see a game there.
Yeah.
I've seen the stadium. We've gone by the outside of it, but since we were up, the one time we were up there, it was during the All-Star break. We didn't get a chance to go,
Mhm.
and then the other time it was February.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of which, seeing a game or taking a tour, there's Fenway, and for those who aren't familiar, that's the one that has the green monster. So if you
Monster.
watch, um, what's the movie with Kevin Costner, um, James Earl Jones? If you build it, they will come. Field of
Oh,
Dreams.
Field of
That's it.
Dreams. It's such a good show. Field of Dreams. It's the only show that I've ever seen my husband cry. He still, like, yeah, every once in a while when he gets all up in his feels, he turns on Field
You
of
want to
Dreams.
have a catch, Dad?
Yeah, such a
But
good
yeah,
show.
yeah, they go to Fenway where they learn about Moonlight Graham,
Yep. It's
and
a
it's based on the book called Shoeless Joe.
Mhm.
Good
Yep.
book too. There's also the TD Garden, aka the Boston Garden, and you can see the parquet floor. Now we went to the original Boston Garden whenever we went back in 1994, and like I said, big Larry Bird fans, we got to sit in the seat that he sat in. So this was after he had retired, and so but he still had season tickets, and he got to sit in one. So they're like, yeah, that's Larry Bird's seat. So we all got our pictures taken sitting in Larry Bird's seat. There's also Foxborough Stadium. Being a Steeler fan, if anyone knows football, NFL history, you know the heartache we suffered at the fate of the Patriots. So I'm gonna just move on.
Skip on. Move
Yeah,
on.
move along. Boston has many famous colleges: Harvard, MIT, Boston College, Boston University, Northeastern. Every year, if you're a hockey fan, they have the Bean Pot Tournament. That's Harvard, BC, BU, and Northeastern, and they play that at the Boston Garden, at the TD Garden. So if you want to see some good hockey there, this is a big, big rivalry.
Yeah.
So no matter what the teams are like each year, you're going to see uh, the student athletes give their all for this. Now, going a little bit outside and take some bit of side trips, Plymouth Rock is very near there, although it's very, very underwhelming. It's not what I expected.
Everybody
It's a
always says that about Plymouth Rock. It's not,
it's
yeah.
it's a rock that has 1620 engraved on it. And it's protected by like a canopy, and there's like an elevated walkway so you can go and like look down on it. And the thing that really struck me is well, I don't know if we were there at low tide or whatever, but it's like 50 to 100 yards from the water. I was like,
Yeah.
this is where they first how did they like jump? Was there a zip line to it or something?
Yeah,
But
it's pretty much, I mean, if it wasn't like, if it didn't have some history to it, it would just be another rock. So,
yeah, and it it's worth seeing just to say that you were there, but it was kind of like a joke of this is it.
this is it. Yep.
So, but to see Plymouth Rock, it again more history of the United States.
Yep.
Some other side trips, if you want to make a little bit longer drive up to Cape Cod. Now you can go whale watching from Boston Harbor. But what we found is if you drive up to Cape Cod, you spend a lot less time on the boat driving, and you can have more time on the boat looking for whales.
Right.
Because up on Cape Cod is near Cape Cod is where you're going to be closer to where the whales are going to pass through. So you have a much shorter journey to get out there and
If
take your
you've never done
Dramamine.
a whale watching trip, it's something that you need to put on your list. It's just really cool. Like, it's so amazing to think about these massive, massive animals that are in the water. Like, because a lot of the times you'll see just their tails. You'll just see their tails, or even not even their whole tail, just like a corner of their tail, and it's huge. They're massive. Whale watching is really, really cool. And plus, you kind of feel like you're like kind of on a treasure hunt because sometimes you'll get really lucky and find lots and lots of them, and other times you won't find very many, or maybe none at all. But it's still really like a cool, cool thing to do. And there's lots of different places to do it. But yeah.
And I've told this story on here before, but this is where my sister and I were out on the prow of the boat looking in, everyone's looking in one direction where we saw a couple of them spouting off in the distance. And then one snuck up right behind us and was 10 feet away and, scared the something out of us. May
Yep.
or may not have needed a different pair of shorts after that.
Yep.
But again, seeing one that, 10 feet away that's that size. And even a small whale is still big.
Yep.
Other
They're
stuff up on,
they're
go ahead.
whaley big. Whaley.
I thought I'm the one who's supposed to be auditioning for the Jungle Cruise skipper captain here.
Yep.
The a local place in Western Pennsylvania and in West Virginia is called Eaton Park, and they have the whale of a cod fish sandwich, especially during Lent. And it's a whale, yeah, it's a whale of a big cod, as their tagline says. Also in Cape Cod, you get to see the Cape Cod Wooden Bat League. This is like the premier amateur league for college students, who are not pros yet. And so if you want to catch a good baseball game while you're on vacation, this is where you got to go. We didn't actually go to the game and get to watch it, but as we were driving by, we went by one of the fields one night where they were playing a game, and I was craning my neck out the window, like, "Hey, mom, dad, can we go watch a game?" And my sister's like, "No, let's go home. I don't want to." It's like, oh. So missed opportunities. And one thing to be careful of is the water is very cold there.
It is.
We were there in July and we went to the beach the one time on Cape Cod and you're like, "Can we run into the water, mom and dad?" And like, "Yeah, go ahead. Take off your shoes and socks." Go. And we ran like 2 feet in and hit that water like, oh my, we were
Yeah,
out of there so
it's
fast.
similar temperatures to like the Oregon coast water where, yeah, I mean, you're not doing a lot of like you're not doing tropical vacation beaching. So,
Get your polar plunge in the middle of August.
yeah.
Join the Polar Bear Club. And also some of the islands you want to go to. You can go to Nantucket because there once was this man from Nantucket and all right, we'll leave it there.
Stop. Nope.
No, I've always heard the startup of that, and I've never heard anyone ever finish
No.
that
I
poem. So
mean, if you
is there
stand
actually a
around long
finish to
enough
it?
on the street in Boston, you might be able to hear some of the words that they use.
That's wondering, is there an actual end to that poem? Is there like a specific one, or is it just a joke from the beginning because people can just use their imagination of
Yeah,
how
and
it's
they
going to end?
swarm. Yep. Yep.
Another great place to visit is Martha's Vineyard, which was the location where they filmed Jaws. So just remember that amity means friendship.
So
And
I
now
think
you can,
about like Boston, like still, I think about Boston and think about how it's really a great place to like start, right? I mean, you can make a whole trip out of it, but you can also make it like that it's kind of like a the hub of a wheel. There's like a ton of different like offshoots and places that you can go and see. And one of my favorite ways to see Boston is to do a New York England cruise. So there's several different cruise lines that have New England fall cruises. So you go out of you typically go out of New York, JFK, um, the and then you go up the coast and you do Boston and you get to see like just like a really good like little spot. And the cool thing about Boston too is in the fall, the leaves and the trees are just turning, and it is that like that quintessential thing that you picture of a good fall day. Beautiful trees, beautiful, like it just has a crispness in the air. Boston's a really, really cool city. And there's a lot of different ways that we can make it happen where you can go and visit it.
yeah, it can either be the entire trip or it can be the start of your trip or a stop on your trip,
Yeah.
the hub of your trip. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can get to. I have to get up to Springfield where the uh Naismith like basketball Hall of Fame is. That's
Yeah.
another. I've been to a couple of the other ones, the football and the baseball ones. So I got to go to Toronto and get the hockey one too. I think we talked about this when we did our sports travel.
Well, and that's the thing, like a city like Boston, really and truly, you can get a group together. You can do like a guy's trip, you can do a girlfriend's weekend, you can do like a family trip, an extended family trip, a couple's trip, and there really is enough to see and do that you're going to hit everybody. Like and that's the thing, like there's so many different from sports to culinary to historical to just chilling and like grabbing a drink and just hanging out. There's a lot to do. And it's good to have kind of somebody to bounce ideas off of. So,
Yeah, and we've mainly just focused on the historical part, the historical sites in Boston. That there's the artistic ones if you want to go to museum or if you want to go. like to a natural history museum, whether it's an art museum, whether it's a children's museum, whether you want to be a foodie and go try a bunch of the other different restaurants. We just hit on some of the seafood, but Boston's a big, vibrant city that they
It
have
really
something for
is.
everybody. So, Katie, do you want to give a travel tip?
Probably that the more you explore, like it's gonna sound like a cheesy like 80s commercial, the more you explore, the more you know, right? So like with a trip like this, the more history comes alive, the more that you and I really I think that it's I think that when you travel, you give yourself a gift and you give the people that you travel with a gift of knowledge that you can't get anywhere else. You can't get in books, you can't get on YouTube videos, you can't get through podcasts, you can't get that kind of knowledge from anywhere else but seeing it.
Whenever you paused a bit and you said, I thought you were gonna say, no, I'm good this time. And so mine kind of dovetails off of that, that when you visit historically significant locations, to take some time to learn the history beforehand so that you can better appreciate what you're seeing. It helps you tell your trip so you can see the most important locations. And by most important, I mean the most important to you. Of, oh, I read about this and I'm intrigued by this person and their role in this specific act. So I want to go here. If you're a big Paul Revere fan, sure, you want to see his house in the Old North Church, but then you might also want to go to Lexington and Concord and to see, drive along the path that he rode and to get in more into that. So depending on knowing what you want to see can then help you tailor your trip to in a different way. And as I mentioned before, also know the climate. Oh, sorry, you're gonna say something, Katie?
I was just gonna say too, like you never know like what like when you travel with your kids, you never know what's gonna spark their interest. So my mom and dad took me on a trip and we did Washington, D.C. when I was in fifth grade, and it was the summer before fifth grade, and then we studied US history in fifth grade, and that really started like the little thing of like that's why I majored in history in college is because it started that trip started a spark of like my love for history. So really and truly, like you appreciate things better and you never know what a trip what visiting a spot is going to spark some kind of interest, some kind of like newfound love, some kind of passion that you never thought of.
I majored in awesomeness in college, but then I had to change majors. No, I completely agree with that, Katie. That it's the places you go and the experiences you have that can then influence your kids' lives or even your own life of visiting someone like, no matter how old you are, how young you are, and you go like, oh, this is amazing. I love this. And then it can lead you to wanting to explore something else and get to know something in more detail. And my final thing is whenever you go to Boston or go anywhere, know the climate because Boston's gonna be a lot more pleasant in July than it is in February. And but don't plan on going swimming in the ocean too much. So come prepared, unless you have a wetsuit
Yep.
or a dry suit. Now, if you have a destination or experience that you'd like to have us discuss on the Where Yinz Goin podcast, or if you'd like to share your favorite destination or a travel tip, feel free to contact us. We'd love to hear your feedback and ideas. You can find us on Facebook and X at the Where Yinz Goin podcast. Well, actually, I think it's just Where Yinz Goin. Yinz spelled Yinz, Goin, Goin with the apostrophe. Don't forget the question mark at the end. All this information is going to be in the episode description. So if you want to contact us to book a trip or have any questions, you know how to find us. Katie, this was a fun to take a nice trip to Boston. So
Yeah.
happy early Patriots Day.
Yep, you too. Thank you.
Please like, follow, subscribe, leave a review, tell a friend. If you like what you heard, let others know. We can get the word out on what we're doing here. You found us, obviously, on your favorite podcast location, or maybe not your favorite. Maybe you took a trip, took a chance and tried somewhere else. But yeah, we were found pretty much anywhere, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Apple Music, whatever. So let people know they can find us and listen on their favorite platform. Please join us next time. We're heading out that. We'll see you later.